I am Netwuversitan. I've decided to not wait until the English translation and see if I can make sense of it by using Google Translate. Yes or no? What have I come to? Previously on Leviathan. In response to Azier's emotionless and clinical description of Garnet's refraction-based power boost, with some personal annotations from Maestro Jumsun of the Ring, with the brief mention of it being loosely based on Yi Sang's technology, as in one of those that will become one of the damn dozen. Garnet responded by breaking the window that was so durable, it required the lance of the Black Silence thrown like a javelin to destroy. Then he used Lulu's flaming bat on the ring higher up, but it's clear that Jumsun had a few high dodge rolls as none of the swings hit. But the kick enhanced by the Ring Maestro's suit variant was enough to slam her back. Garnet used this to basically use Yujin's abilities and deliver Boundary of Death and rolled a 4, slicing her left arm off. Jumsun and Siash mentioned that the cocoons were new, dual white nights that occurred before Elkorp's nest was dumped in the outskirts. After they were excited about what the cocoons might yield, Garnet was angered by this and used the power of the Black Silence to launch everything he had against Maestro Jumsun. But just as he was about to finish her off with Durandal, he was overcome with grief after losing Levis. The memories of the alternates blurred together with the real memories. Jumsun exploited this by cutting off his feet, just as the cocoons hatched, revealing that those abducted were now distortions. The bestial kind. All this was too much for him. He gave up and formed his own cocoon. Yeah, I know. What you're expecting from this, a happy ending? Do you not know the definition of grimdark? This is basically Tuesday for those people. Anyway. Now for the continuation. After a heavy focus of Garnet, we now move our focus to Virgilius the Red Gaze. After dispatching that docent that he was occupying to give Garnet time to assist the others, he eventually found an exit from that corridor overflowing with countless gates. It was quite a trial. He eventually found the right door and found a dry hallway. He asked if Garnet safely found the lab and joined the others, having faith that he'd find it, having a knack for that, despite his lack of experience and underdeveloped skill. Where, along with Rikoka and Nansiul, they operated without problems before they entered the hallway, believing that they had the data by that point and possibly tried to rescue the children, as Garnet wanted. About that, let us just say that, quotation, no plan survives first contact with the enemy has never been more relevant. Certainly not in this case. He's not going to like it when he finds out. But that's for later. When he catches up with the others, it's a story for another time. He, however, has doubts sitting behind his back. Intuition, something that he can't explain. Well, it's not steered him wrong before. He didn't see himself as the main character who led his life as a problem solver to that point. Actually, you are. And thankfully, you're not barking enough to break the fourth wall. That's the preserve of a nutty Canadian or a mutated lawyer. Anyway, the shadow was growing heavier after he saw Lapis's video. And this shadow was Garnet's. Even though he didn't know what light was creating this shadow, he brought Garnet into that operation, even if most objected to this. Virgilius, you seem to forget that you're not living in a democracy. Even though the intelligent decision would be to leave Garnet in the office, most seeing him as dead weight. To be honest, he can't blame him, as he's seen as no match for the ring due to the lack of combat experience, even against opponents below his level. He also sucks at hiding his emotions and at deceiving others. He's never felt good to ignore that feeling, a repulsive, unbearable pressure, where it's as if he could feel some cold at the back of the neck, like something was on his shoulder, pointing his finger at it to go a specific way, calling it the flow. Like a reference to Taoist belief, a cosmic force that binds and releases. As he rose up the grades as a fixer, the flow had become stronger and more pronounced. His experience bursting out at times like this. He saw Garnet being involved as part of the flow, which was cruising and blowing. At least until recently. Then he noticed that he was being followed and said, "Come out," picking up a fishy taste and smell in the air. This shadow was another flow, who realized that they were detected. There was no way to hide it. The footsteps didn't sound like Garnet, Rikoko, or Nansul. It sounded too tall. It wasn't any of the ring either. The fishy smell and voice was, in fact, Gubo of Encore, who replied to Virgilius' silence with the remark, "If we met 3 times, it'd be very circular. There'd be a strong relationship between us." Virgilius noted that his coat had blood on it. Gubo did much to get there, seeing as the auction option was out. Virgilius asked if he killed them all. The people in the auction house and the people in the corridor. Gubo's shy smile confirmed this. Apparently, he and his escorts pretended to be injured to lower their guard, which failed miserably. Virgilius spoke of people accompanying him. The smile on Gubo's lips remained. Yes. He dismissed the 2 women that he was with as losses in that fight. He was thankful that he didn't have any losses on his person. Virgilius noted how clean his gloves were. No trace of battle. The coat that was stained with blood was undamaged. Figuring out that Gubo threw those 2 women under the ring's bus, just to save his own worthless hide. Gubo rationalized this as saying that he had no choice but to do that, as he didn't want to break the rules of the auction hosted by the ring. Unfortunately, Virgilius forced him to act this way. He was resentful, due to how Gubo bid 10 billion arn with a casual expression, which was a surprise to those attending. Clearly, if he could have contacted Maestro Jumsun and paid for it directly to access the corridor, he'd have done that already. Gubo wasn't blaming Virgilius, wanting to clear up that misunderstanding. That much money shook all those that were certainly quite capable of flushing away more money in that one place than your average backstreet inhabitant would ever see in their entire lives, even if they were allowed to die of old age. Virgilius noted that he could smile calmly, even though he killed all those attending the auction. They looked quite young as well. He had some noticeable emotional agitation fighting the ring thugs and docents on the way there. Yet he had a straight expression and was relaxed, joking even. But he could tell that Gubo was feeling anxiety, obsession, and longing, willing to pay any price for a goal, to calculate and postpone the emotions and actions that come with the results. So Gubo's a psychopath. Well, there are quite a few in business that are, certainly in our world. So it's not a huge surprise that there are quite a few in that world as well. Virgilius saw this as the flow, noting that if Gubo showed up, there was something that he wanted. Gubo wanted to know Virgilius' original goal, and to be truthful about it. And with Gubo's current expression, the story will make sense. He found it amusing that he was even considering lying to him. He observed the bloodstains on the glass grains appearing like bloodstains inside his pupils, stating that valuable assets were stolen. He was there to get it back. And as he was listening to this, Virgilius saw that Gubo saw it as something as simple as a borrowed tool being returned. But it didn't seem like a material asset. Virgilius wanted to know what this asset was. Gubo did not buy this ignorance in his red eyes. Azir was a researcher who was taken under the nose of the director, which, under normal circumstances, wasn't a big deal. But Virgilius was not lying that he didn't know, but he was counting on the benefits of being honest with Gubo, who mentioned Israel of Encore, which stayed Virgilius' hand as he had his attention caught by this detail, asking if it was Hermann Isra. Gubo was amazed by this, warning him not to speak too hastily. Yeah, the Ring and Encore, they were both obsessed with what they see, which would explain why the nest of District 14 has a minimalist aesthetic to it, as it doesn't give away too much, and why they do not tolerate video recording within any part of District 14, as that records what is seen. They're so intolerant of this that they send specialist fixers to take those that record video footage, dead or alive, to be permanently imprisoned. Yes. And as for the permanent imprisonments, don't ask me the details as it's not mentioned. But this is if those people aren't killed outright. Virgilius understands that if Hermann Isra ordered Assyria to be retrieved, it's highly likely that he would be involved with what was there, thinking that Garnet would love this deduction that was occurring. Virgilius seemingly messing with Gubo by saying that they're seemingly trying to add a new function to the suicide vending machine. Gubo did not find this funny. He found it difficult to say more, asking if he knew. Virgilius not hiding his relief. This is new, isn't it? The suicide vending machine was a representative symbol of Encore, receiving countless criticisms and admiration from other nests, along with being the main source of income for Encore and culture. Quite a few use them. It's something unique to that wing. Oh, please don't let that be Encorp's singularity. Sounds so ridiculous. Not to mention disgusting, isn't it? Seriously? There's a vending machine that provides assistance with suicide? Let me guess. It gives portable hanging kits, cyanide capsules, portable electric charge devices to stop hearts, maybe even a playlist of the worst songs in history. If that doesn't kill someone, nothing will. Although seriously, I suspect it's for those that either have some incurable medical condition and want to go out peacefully, or for those that just can't take it, even with all the wealth and success in their career. It's just not enough. Either that, or they're about to get fired and would rather die than go back to the back streets. Anyway, Virgilius pretended not to know Gubo's intentions, and also pretended that he knew Gubo's intentions. Then Gubo mentioned that it was as much as he could reveal without him getting into trouble, noting that their reasons were different for coming there, but they have similar business. Virgilius was wary of this, as this was solicitation in the form of proposal, knowing that teaming up would be more beneficial under these circumstances. Regardless, he said to Gubo that he was counting on his usefulness, and Gubo could see this, reading the situation and reacting quickly, according to what he saw. Then he offered to reveal more, Virgilius nodding to let him proceed, mentioning that his purpose was to... Well, it was because of the glass technology being developed by the Ring, a new potential singularity that would be observed. The rumours seemed to spread far. Virgilius couldn't argue against that, seeing that skill as being called Yuri. Yuri being Korean for glass, saying that as if he's following through. Gubo continued that Asiya and he could give him some of the data from the machines. He was silent about this. Gubo pleaded with him that it would end that endeavour if they fought. Virgilius was reminded of that tape. Asiya seemed to be in charge of that experiment. With his assistance, the experimental data could easily be obtained. That was the mission, while also working on the safe removal of the children. Regardless, Virgilius told him not to follow. Gubo telling him that the value of the data was clearly guaranteed. Virgilius understood this much, but to give it all away without missing a single one of those children, where they were considered leftovers. Yes, those that didn't make it were thrown away, as if they were never there. This made Gubo's brow twitch, asking if it was too much of a demand. What were they supposed to bring? Virgilius asked if his goal was to secure a seer, which was secondary to his greed. This gave Gubo the impression that he was before one that had no useful information. He fixed his weapon and narrowed the distance between them. He was armed with a karambit. I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation, but regardless, it's a curved Indonesian knife that can cut and scrape, making it more difficult to miss with that weapon. Well, sadly, Gubo was not skilled in combat, as not even Garnet would fight that badly. Ooh, that's saying a lot, isn't it? Considering what Virgilius said about him earlier. Gubo raised his arms, showing how low his combat proficiency was. It was too easy, not to mention mildly painful for him, as the knife fell short of Virgilius and he found himself being grabbed by Virgilius's right hand by the throats. Looking up at Gubo as he fluttered in the air, he saw the value in the information that he provided was just that. Squeezing his neck a little harder, the moans barely being let out. He made it clear that he's not going to put any more power to his grip, knowing that it could be lethal. He dropped him and he fell to the floor, gasping for air. Yeah. Don't provoke a colour fixer, unless you're sure you can get away with it. Thankfully, Virgilius saw that Gubo was more valuable and indeed useful alive. Gubo remarking that he was being too stingy. Virgilius saying that it's a unique privilege. Gubo seeing the humour in this, telling him that, well, then he told him that they should head to the lab. Virgilius remarking that Gubo doesn't know the location, and he's unwilling to give him directions, especially if he's going to try what he just did then again. Gubo asking if he heard it, Virgilius saying that he does, telling him to follow. Gubo remarking that it's polite to throw a stone to those that lose in counting, telling him that it's something that he can feel free to play. They both walked down the hallway unopposed. Gubo was nervous at this silence, asking if Virgilius sent his colleague into the lab first, noting that his eyes widened when he called his huge bid. Virgilius broke this silence, saying yes. He's going to the family that's part of his office. Gubo noted that while the word family sounded good, it's a word that doesn't fit him. Virgilius was annoyed with Gubo speaking of a subject that he pretended to know, but he couldn't deny it. Family wasn't a word that he used on his part. Garnet, Yandian, and sometimes Denver would be associated with that word. Rikoko hated it, but soon got used to it, even if it seemed masculine to her. Nanseul laughed quietly about it, where he once said that if they sat around the table every day and ate together, that's their family. Rikoko being fed up with Garnet's muttering, This was all he was thinking about while the silence continued. Not being able to shake off the emotional stuff, then he broke this silence, speaking to Gubo, saying that it looks like they're all there. He stopped in front of the door, thinking snow, flakes, and grass, remembering the image code that Lan Yen sent him, and then opening the door to the laboratory hallway. All those lying helplessly. The ring was definitely in charge of that. He was relieved to find them. Those that weren't distorted. Unbeknownst to him. He knew that Garnet found and entered that lab safely. Virgilius mentioning that Garnet had basic skills more than he thought. At first he thought that he had to take someone with him that was more experienced. Gubo pretended to admire, but Virgilius didn't mean to be rude. He was in a hurry. It was personal with Garnet, and perhaps Gubo knew, but pretended not to. Considering that he was drawing on her face without hiding her proud look. Yes, there was still the matter of Maestro Jumsun, and also Lapis. Neither of them were accounted for. He couldn't even grasp the depth of how far he'd retreated from himself. Then he heard the voices of Garnet, Nuncial, and Rikoko. Gubo asking if it sounds like weeping. Then he stopped speaking. The flow was pointing in the wrong place, towards ruins, rather than a peaceful valley with mountains. What was buried in the ruins, however, was success. Did he think that it'd be different? The shade of Garnet would not be dark. Then Gubo asked if that was the family he was talking about. They found the cocoon that contained Garnet. What will come out will be a distortion, like the others. The others roaring in the laboratory. That which was more typical of the outskirts or the ruins, crawling across the floor. And in the center of that room, the red jewel shined alone. A color that covered the sky only when the sun goes down, or the color of bruises on a crushed chest. Ah, like your previous handiwork, Virgilius, before meeting Gubo. Or the color of some fruits ripened and burst out. It was clear to him. He asked if the gravity was pressing down on him without knowing how low he could get. He remembered the faces of the children when they were in the nursery waiting for gifts. This stopped his flow. He felt that he could turn the city upside down. But he broke and turned away from the flow. He wanted to accompany the gloomy flow that ran on his shoulders and his back like an ice-cold waterfall. That which he could control, as it was his flow. A different nature to the flow that was shaky, but brightly coloured, as if the shadows were filled with light. But shadows can't shine at all. They were born from obscuring lights. He had arrived in the ruins, that corner of hell. Well, at least the deeper circle of it, as the city itself was a living hell. He noticed that the shadow on his back was pointing to a murky current. A current where there was no turning back. It's not about saving the children for Garnet anymore. He was being pushed into the flow. He couldn't break it. He looked at the wailing in front of his eyes, shining and falling apart in that cry, the struggles of the family. Ooh, if he found out that Nunzial had betrayed them, sold them out after killing Rikoko, and that the glass window technology had some part in Garnet being in that state. Nunzial is as good as dead. And as for Maestro Jumsun, things will be getting worse for that one. Also, is M-Corp's singularity something that involves the suicide vending machine? I know it sounds ridiculous, but considering that K-Corp's singularity is medical nanotech, it might be the case. Who knows? There might be some rich nest dweller that wanted to know what dying was like and used a product of the suicide vending machine. Now, this is assuming that this person was either middle-aged or elderly. They killed themselves and possibly have R-Corp clone them once and put them in that body where they'd essentially be brought back to life in their physical prime. Well, if they can afford it and they can take the suitable precautions, it's possible. I suspect that there's more of a wait before Garnet hatches from that cocoon. But Virgilius and Gubo will have much to do in the meantime. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!